I don't know if Cuomo will be making a comeback
He will
anytime
not be
soon.
making a comeback.
No, you don't think he goes down to, I don't know, maybe a House seat that he can win or something that he can latch onto? It doesn't seem like he's done.
I don't think there's a sheriff's position. I think he's done.
I'm Jacob Studwell, and today we're welcoming the Prince of Polling to the Predicted podcast. He's so ubiquitous. He's been referenced in The West Wing, Gossip Girl, House of Cards, The Simpsons. Thank you for coming on and to talk about all things polling and prediction markets. John Zogby, thank you so much for joining me.
We're good to go.
Beautiful. So you just released a generic ballot poll, and everyone can go find that at Zogby Strategies on X or Twitter. I want to discuss the results because you found the two parties at a dead heat.
Yeah.
45.8, 46.3. It's basically 46 if you round everything. And it's contrary to a lot of other polls that are seeing Democrats with that probably mid-single digit lead. I'm curious, when you dug into the results, are there any details in there that kind of explain the result?
Yeah, there is. I mean, first of all, the poll we did the previous month showed Democrats with a 5 point lead in the generic. The generic, is an imperfect measurement because people don't vote nationally; they vote locally,
Yep.
and we find historically that Democrats need to be leading by about five in order to be in a position to win seats. In this instance, I was surprised that our poll came out a tie. But then as I looked at the details, party breakdown, Democrats solidly voting for a Democratic candidate, Republicans obviously for a Republican candidate. But again, it was the movement was among independents and among moderates, who are not interchangeable parts, incidentally. But yeah, the independent support for a Democratic candidate actually went down from February until March. Now, as I said, I was surprised because if you look at the reality of the situation since November of 2024 in special elections, mainly for Congress and for state houses, some statewide Supreme Court races, like, for example, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, Democrats have been sweeping them.
Yeah.
Or in some very red districts, way outperforming what Democrats did in those districts in 2024. But I suppose as I look at our numbers, which I feel are accurate, I think what's going on is there's not much confidence in the Democrats. I think minds are made up about Donald Trump and the Republicans. I think these numbers indicate that there is no love for the Republicans. But where Democrats are hurting is a lack of trust nationwide. Now, perhaps when we get into district by district, Democrats will win and, like I said, outperform. But when you ask, do you trust the Democrats on certain issues? They win on certain issues, but they lose to Republicans on some major issues. And so, Democrats' advantage, but I have to say we have a long way to go here.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were two YouGov polls taken at the exact same time that you were taking your poll, both showing both parties 15 points and 16 points unfavorable. There was a Quinnipiac bunch of polls that show Republicans are underwater 18 points and Democrats are underwater 25 points.
Yes.
And that period was like just after your poll. So I think that's definitely telling you the story here. But because of this all-time low approval by both parties, do you think that generic ballot polling is not as useful and you're kind of going to have to see those direct head-to-head matchups in your polls beforehand?
Well, we always need to see the head-to-head matchups. The generic is always going to be an imperfect number. However, it is useful to watch a trend line.
Hmm.
So if you see Republicans falling away or Democrats pulling ahead or falling away, it gives us a flavor, but not a predictive tool. And that's important because, the very same poll that we did had the president at a 44% job approval rating,
Hmm.
53% disapproval, but the president still has some support out there. And he has, he's upside down, but he still has decent approval ratings and outscores Democrats on immigration, um, and a few other issues.
Hmm. Yeah.
Democrats win on, on health care, for example, and on education, and so on. But it all depends what's going to emerge as the top issue. At this moment in time, Democrats have an edge on the economy. And
Hmm.
so if the economy continues, in its spiral or gets worse, advantage Democrats again at a point where Democrats cannot really claim that they're viewed as favorably.
Hmm. And you did another poll on Iran approval.
Yeah,
Marco Rubio just gave us a new estimate of the war will go on for weeks. A little bit updated, but things change every day, right? So
yes, they
I don't
do.
know what exactly is the best estimate. But do you think at some point there will be a steep drop off in approval, whether it's boots on the ground or just a longer engagement here in Iran, or is there something else you gleaned from that other poll that you took?
Yeah, so let's start with the baseline. About 43% approve the president's handling of Iran, and almost a majority disapprove. Um, Under the best of circumstances, those are not go to war numbers. You know,
They're not. They're
they,
definitely not. No.
they're not. The country is split, and I may have said about 49% actually disapprove the president's handling, but much more of them strongly disapprove, which means they're not going to change.
Hmm.
So, but then the other thing is, we like to use projective questions. What if this were to last a month?
Hmm.
What if it were to last 3 to 6 months, more than 6 months? With each increment, the support goes down. So time is not on the president's side, and we can extract from that not on the Republicans' side. The party would be blamed. That's why just today, and we're recording this on Friday.
Yep.
Um, Israel has announced that it's going to be much more aggressive in bombing of Iran. And the president has announced, really, actually for the first time, that he's pausing and urging Israel to hold back, which means, say what you want about President Trump, but I think he does read numbers.
Oh yeah, he definitely reads numbers. I was just seeing there's a taco index now to kind of tell you
Yes.
basically if it gets past a certain point, President Trump will probably pull back a bit. But always fun to see kind of what he actually listens to and what he's actually following. I'm curious just to get into the weeds of your poll here. There was a question on Twitter that I wanted to ask you. You broke down your generic ballot poll into South, East, Central Great Lakes, and West, and you had a larger sample of Southern respondents. I'm curious, is that just your special your secret sauce there, or why was there more respondents in the
Well,
in the
that's
Southern?
interesting. Of all the questions, that is fairly steady based on voting patterns. We use what's known as, well, all of us pollsters, random stratified sampling. So it's not like we just take a random sampling nationwide. We randomize by region. So figuring that about 32% of the sample will be from the South. Now, so that everybody understands, North Carolina is a large and growing state.
Hmm.
Florida and Georgia, obviously. Texas is included
Texas.
in
Yeah.
the South, and Texas is blowing up.
Massive, right?
Yeah. So, not surprising then. Also, if you look at the map, that's a very large region unto itself.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a good answer. And I want to also ask you large polling question, but what adjustments, if you made any, post 2016 when Trump came onto the stage, if you made any specific adjustments, then post 2020 when COVID hit, did you make any adjustments? And are you making adjustments backwards now that Trump won't be on the ballot and COVID is mostly dissipated?
So my life has been in polling has been one of adjustments.
Yeah.
I go back to 1984 when people would answer their telephone and say, "Oh yeah, I'll be happy to take a poll," or "Shh, I've got a long distance call. Somebody's asking me important questions." And 96% of the American households had a landline telephone. And then, from then on, answering machines and call waiting and all sorts of adjustments and
Already.
a lot of social changes as well.
Mhm.
People not being home,
Right.
at all hours, or being bombarded with telemarketing calls, and so empowered, to not answer a telephone call, or certainly what might be considered as a nuisance call. But um, we knew with response rates plummeting that we needed to make adjustments. So we were among the pioneers in the political arena of doing online polling. And so we collected massive numbers of uh, of emails, and then used our massive call center to validate those emails.
Got
We'd
it.
call about 10% of the people back and validated, and then ask them if they'd be willing to be part of a panel. But since 2016, first of all, I have a different analysis of 2016,
Go
and
ahead.
and 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 it has broader implications. Even though I've been on the fortunate end many, many times of calling these elections, within a percentile, what I
Hmm.
also know is that there are people who make up their minds at the last minute,
Hmm.
and we aren't polling
Right.
at the last minute.
You lock in, 2 weeks before, 1 week before, whatever it is, you're kind of done
Well, a
polling,
couple
right?
of days anyway.
Sure.
And that's
Sure.
when, you still have we have 10 to 14% who say, I made up my mind firmly
Right.
that day. So, with that said, if you look closely at the aggregate and of the individual polls,
Hmm.
in the polling aggregate websites, what you find is that 10 days, 9 days before the election, Real Clear Politics, for
Hmm.
example, the
Hmm.
battleground states, you had Hillary leading by 9 in Pennsylvania, 10 in New Hampshire. I may be off here, my
But
memory,
generally,
but generally speaking, Michigan and so on. And with each day, you saw her lead going down a point, a point, a point in all of those states.
mm,
By the day before, she pulls ahead, or Trump pulls ahead in North Carolina, but New Hampshire had been a Hillary 10-point lead. The day before the election, it was a Hillary 3-point lead. And so I believe that the polling actually captured the strong potential that
mhm.
Trump could win. So rather than, you know, and I don't mean this as rationalizing, I wasn't polling in 2016. That's the one
That's
presidential
good.
year.
Get that on the record. I want everyone to know that
Yeah.
the Prince of Polling was not polling on in
Yeah,
2016.
I did not. But when I look at my colleagues, I think they got a very bad rap. There was, I wrote a piece for Forbes. I was writing actually every day, but it was a noon on election day. And I said, anybody who tells you they know what's going to happen is lying to you.
Hmm.
There is
Hmm.
movement here, and I'm not calling this one.
Very nice. All right, I want to ask you about the state of polls today. We've already had a few primary races.
Uh-huh.
Polling has been pretty impressive thus far, what I can see. What do you think how the polling has fared in Texas or Illinois? Any other races you want to shout out? I don't know. Is polling been pretty secure and impressive so far this year?
Yeah, I think so. And especially if we have the proper set of expectations. If you're expecting a poll that publishes on Sunday or Monday to tell you right down to the 10th of a percent who's
Right.
leading, isn't it marvelous how many close elections we have? You
Yeah.
know, but in Texas, in the all important Senate race, there was one poll that really nailed it. For Tallarico.
Hmm.
Um, there are some maybe not as impressive, but the trend line was clearly, a good indicator.
Yeah, absolutely. And prediction market traders were also very impressive, at least on the Democratic side. On the Republican side, they flipped big time. Ken Paxton got up to, I think, 85 cents and then completely plummeted to like 20 cents by the time the night was over, even though there was going to be a runoff and everyone kind of expected that. So it's
Well, that
funny
kind
to
of
see.
reminds me, you guys have to be very nice to us because you really need us,
Always.
don't you?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's an important part. Some prediction market experts out there will say, we're better than the polls. You don't need the polls. The polling is a key input into prediction market. We need as much information as possible. That's what prediction market traders should be looking for is more polling, more reliable polling, especially in, smaller state races. We're now relying on, primary state race polling, which is pretty crazy. So it's definitely interesting. But I want to ask you about future polling now. What do
Yeah.
you make of 2028 polling that's, talking about who's in the lead on the Democratic side in 2028 or Republican polling? Do you read too much into it or you think it's not worth much?
No, I mean, it's worth it to know who's got what, today. I
Hmm.
mean, if I know I have to lose weight uh, between now and November, whatever, in 2028. It's useful for me to know how much do I weigh today. Where do I stand, and how much work do I have to do? Am I on pace or not on pace? But by and large, and you know this already, of course, is that name recognition counts at this
Hmm.
stage. So
Yeah.
at this stage, actually, even before this stage, in January of 1997, a fellow newly elected governor of Texas by the name of George W. Bush was the front runner for the GOP. And, when we asked why, 13% said because he should have beaten Bill Clinton. I think he got shafted in that election in 1992. It was name recognition, period. And
Yeah.
you won't recall, but others will recall that there were names like uh, Elizabeth Dole and Jack Kemp and very well known John McCain, very well known Republicans, but George W. Bush was the name, and it was name recognition.
It helps to have the exact same name, right? I mean,
Well, it
there's no,
it certainly
barring
does.
one letter, right?
Well, if you're looking at the Republican race today, of course J.D. Vance, but Donald Trump Jr. is
Right.
in many of the polls in second place. Marco Rubio, of course, who's walked through the park a few times. On
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
Democratic side, Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom runs the risk, actually, of peaking.
Yeah. And we've already seen that. I mean, he's dropped a bit, and he's right now on an active book tour. You're
Yeah.
right. He should be gaining momentum at this point. It seems like he's losing momentum. Interestingly enough, not completely known, but we've known him since 2020. At least Pete Buttigieg seems to be gaining some momentum, but he's not on an active book tour, right?
No.
So I don't know whether to read into that kind of stuff this early in the game,
Well,
right?
only that, when you look at Buttigieg, he leads handsomely in New Hampshire, right?
Yeah.
And of course,
Right.
he spent a lot of time in New Hampshire, and I can't remember exactly how he did, but he did he
He,
well.
he won Iowa as well, by the
Yeah.
way, in 2020. I mean, that was a Michigas. Bernie also won Iowa. Multiple people, the app, the whole thing. But
Our
yeah,
key
the early
word for this
states.
interview is Michigas. Okay.
Love it. Love it. I'll try to fit it in one more time. I want to move on to our buy, sell, hold segment. So in this segment, I'll give you a contract. You tell me if you'd buy, sell, or hold. You'd buy if it's cheaper than you thought it would be. You'd sell if you think it's more expensive, or you'd hold if you think that's right. So let's talk about Pete Buttigieg. He's right now at 4 cents. Are you interested in that buy? And if you're not, are you interested in any other candidate? Most of them are around like 8 cents, except Gavin Newsom's at 27 and AOC's at 11.
Oh, I personally always go for the underdog. And so not always, but it's appealing to me because if he wins, he really win. I really
Mhm.
win. I think Pete Buttigieg could have legs, in this.
Mhm.
Obviously, there are some difficulties, that he may face. Um, uh, but not the least of which was having served in the Biden administration during a very controversial period.
Right.
Although that all of those controversies are coming home to roost right now.
Yeah, and
Um,
he was almost impeached. I mean, they were threatening to impeach him, interestingly enough.
uh-huh.
So
But at
maybe he'll shed that.
4 cents, hey, make an offer.
Yeah, and just so you know, the biggest underdog, and you tell me if you're interested, Cory Booker right now is at 1 cent. Do you think Cory Booker can make that push one more time? Do you think he can
I
get over
would
the hump?
bet on Cory Booker. Because I have seen him speak.
Mhm.
And he's extremely dynamic. He has
Yeah,
an interesting personal story. Voters want stories.
yeah.
If he can break through, but one on one, that incidentally, I wouldn't give you 2 cents for the way John Edwards appeared on television. This is before all of the scandalous stuff. But I saw John Edwards speak in person, and I saw his capacity to bond with people. Cory Booker is more than, and I want this to be understood, more than an impressive black candidate. He has
Mhm.
a very important story to tell, and he tells it extremely well.
Yeah, I mean, true story. I was in my, I was just a kid, a high school kid in my basement, and I wrote down Cory Booker 2020 back in like probably 2014. I thought Cory Booker was going right to the top. Didn't work so much in 2020. It was a rough primary there. But
Yeah.
let's move to who will control the Senate after the midterms this year. Right now, it's Republicans 55 cents, Democrats 45 cents. What's your buy sell hold on Democrats at 45 cents?
I honestly tip in favor. I think this will be a national election. I think it will be mainly about affordability, and I see no movement. I know you want this to be a lightning round, but
No,
uh,
no, no, no. Let's dig deep. I don't have too many. You're good.
uh, if the war in Iraq is lingering, by July,
Iran.
Iran. I'm sorry, Iran.
Hey, I have to point it out because it's a funny parallel here. But yeah,
Yeah,
continue.
it is a funny parallel and a sad parallel,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. No, it's terrible. But
Um, but I do believe that the Democrats, despite my poll, the Democrats will eke out the Senate and they will win back the House.
and what do you think is their best state to potentially flip? Do you have a choice there?
This is on the Senate
Yep.
side. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, I think there's a few of them, um, but I'm I'm racing here to get a picture. Uh,
I'm sure you see in maps, right?
yeah,
I'm,
no,
I'm
I
sure
do.
that's
I'm seeing in maps, and I think there's a real shot at Texas, and Texas is
wow.
a revolution if they do. I also see them holding Georgia. You know,
Yeah.
Osant won by a hair
Hmm.
the last time.
You having confidence in Texas is interesting, given again, given your generic ballot polling.
Yeah.
If it's even, if that's a real environment, Texas is not on the table in a state Trump won by 14 points, I think it was. So
Yeah,
it's
he
it's
did.
it's a tough one.
He did.
All right, I want to also ask you. You're a New Yorker. You've lived in New York. You still live in New York, I'm pretty sure.
I do.
Great. Okay, I want to ask you, Kathy Hochul. What do you think? Will she win more or less in her reelection campaign by 7 points, more or less? That's about what she won
He will
in
win by
2022.
more than 7 points. Yeah. She has the benefit of having a party that is an opposition party that's in disarray. She has the benefit of some genuine policies that are working. And I live in upstate New York. The fact that even though it's at arm's length, she and Zoran Mamdani have embraced, that's not only party unity, but that's also some benefit to people. Um, Whereas her predecessor, Andrew Cuomo, had spent a lot of money and reorganized economic development money on a regional basis. She
Mm,
is reaping the benefits of it as it's no longer new money, it's refreshed money and actual jobs creation. And I think she has the benefit also of running against a candidate who doesn't have a very impressive record.
yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's you think Hochul has focused enough on the rest of the state, not just downstate. I mean, Blakeman's from Long Island, so it's an interesting contrast there.
It is an interesting contrast. And I'll tell you, even from my own and my wife's point of view, because
Hmm.
it is a bifurcated state, upstate and
Yeah,
downstate, it's
very.
nice to have a governor who talks like us, as opposed to the family of New York. Uh, they said about, they could have said about the Cuomos the same thing that they said about Socrates. They soon grew tired of hearing his voice.
Yeah, I don't know if Cuomo will be making a comeback
He will
anytime
not be
soon.
making a comeback.
No, you don't think he goes down to, I don't know, maybe a house seat that he can win or something that he can latch onto? It doesn't seem like he's done.
I don't think there's a sheriff's position. I think he's done.
All right, and then I
Zoran
also want to
Mamdani
ask.
really beat him. I mean, he crushed
Oh,
him.
it was very convincing. I mean, living in the city, I know that Cuomo did not really attempt at getting my vote, getting anybody my age's vote. So it was not an impressive campaign at
He
all,
was
which is the
expecting
exact
a
opposite of.
coronation, basically. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, no, the generation that I come from is not interested in coronations. It's not
mm,
interested in incumbents or experience necessarily. We're definitely interested in new, and that'll become more of the electorate as I age. Um, but it's interesting. No, I want to ask you also about AOC's prospects. If we take a look really quickly at AOC's market right now. Traders think she's 53% chance of running for president, 41% chance of running for Senate up against Chuck Schumer in 2028. Which would you pick if you were her, and what do you think she'll actually pick?
I think given her youth, um, and given Chuck Schumer's growing unpopularity, both
Hmm.
in New York, she actually beats him head to head in New York, and also I think odds are that he will not return as minority or majority leader, whichever it is. I think she would be wise to run for the Senate and could very well, at least given the polls today, win the U.S. Senate, which then positions her better actually better than Barack Obama, who, went from 3 terms as a state senator to the U.S. Senate for 2 years. How much time did he spend in the Senate? I briefed the Senate Democrats several times in that period. Barack Obama was never there because it was his time. He was running for president. I'm not faulting
Yeah.
him for that, but yeah.
No, I think the environment was perfect for Obama. The only issue is, if AOC does run for that Senate seat, she wins, a Democrat then wins in 2028. They're then going to run for re-election in 2032, and her next shot is then 2036. That's 10 years from now. That's a decade. So, she's very youthful now. I think she's 36, if I'm
Something
not
like that.
mistaken, something
Yeah.
like that. She'll then be 46, which, to your point, that's how old Obama was, right? When he was elected. So it's interesting.
Columbus was 58 when he discovered America.
And that was old back then.
That was,
58 was
nobody lived to 58.
no. Very impressive. I don't know how he survived the journey over. John, thank you so much for joining us on the Predicted podcast. We really appreciate it. We'd love to have you back on, maybe closer to the midterms if you're willing.